numbers away to the left. Coles, McKenzie fires it away to George Bridge. Good cover tackle made. Takalua got across, but McKenzie's in the corner. Turning it back on the inside to Paya. They're breaking tackles. Whitelock moves it on to Jacobson. Well, trouble early on here for Donna. Busting through with Papali'i. He's away. 4 minutes on the clock and they're in again. Kenzie again. They go wide. Rico Ioane gets it away to his brother, and here's Bridge in space. George Bridge. He's got Webber with him. And the All Blacks are in again. 3 tries in 6 minutes. Oh, the All Blacks.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Couple Deep. What a guest I have today. One of my favourite Picton men with me. My guest today is no stranger to a microphone, and his career to date consists of, he's been the reporter for Radio NZ, he's been New Talk ZB sports editor and radio commentator, sports presenter for TV3, Sky Sports rugby commentator, the presenter of one of the great rugby TV shows, Reunion, Rugby Nation TV show presenter, Olympic Games coverage, covered equestrian, funny enough, at the Commonwealth Games. We'll have to get into that one a bit later too. He's also the co-author of a successful book, Behind the Silver Fern. It's been a big success, and he's also a very sought-after public speaker these days. And believe it or not, he's here today on Couple Deep with Old Hawkey, and it's a true honour, TJ. Thank you.
Welcome, Dan. Always good to catch up with an old Queen Charlotte College alumni,
Yes,
bro.
and
You've done well, mate. I'm real proud of you. You're talking about me there, but I saw you playing for Queen Charlotte College when you were in your last year at school, and to see you forge this professional career that you've done, mate. I know there's a lot of people down home real proud of you. So.
I probably owe a bit to you, TJ. You've always had my back, and I always really appreciate that. And just go to current. I know recently you've been down to Picton for your father's funeral.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear about that. But as you said, it's the end of a life. But you caught up with a lot of old mates from down there,
Yeah.
and I know Picton's very dear to your heart. So
Yeah. Well, I can't think, Dan, of any place in the world I'd rather have grown up. My dad was he drove a boat for his living. He drove the mail boat, and then he was the ranger in the Maritime Park, and he was a really respected man in the community. Both my parents are down there, and so I was able to, when I was growing up, spend a lot of time out on the boat with him.
yeah,
But there was so much to do down there when we were kids. I mean, got up to all sorts of mischief.
yes,
But it was really cool, It was sad. He passed away. He'd been ill. I was with him when he went, but I spoke at his tangi, and I got up and I just looked up and I just saw all these people that I went to school with, and that says it all about that place to me. And it's always been close to my heart. So, I always feel I was pretty lucky to grow up there.
Yeah, likewise for myself. Yeah, plenty of colourful characters and whatnot. I don't know what it was like back then. It was probably more characters, to be honest. But it was a true. It was a good town. It was a good town.
Yeah, well, during the holidays, I'd go down to Sounds with Dad if he was working. But if I wasn't down to Sounds with him, you'd be going out of the house at 8:30 in the morning, and you might come home for lunch.
Yeah.
But other than that, you'd be out till 5:30, dinner time, because there was just always plenty of stuff to do. I mean, how the heck we got through it without, serious injury?
That's exactly the same as me. Yeah.
Crazy stuff we used to get up to. But yeah, beautiful part of the world, and I still get down there as much as I can.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I don't get down there quite as much as I'd like, but I'm planning to take my boy down there for a look soon. So let's go back to where it all started, TJ, because I feel like some guys in life are born to do a certain thing, to follow a certain path. And commentary for you, it just seems like you're born for it and you've got a gift for it. Was it always like that from a baby? Were you a little kid with a little microphone toy or something like that?
I was always fascinated by the commentary side of it, because when I was growing up, it's that long ago that I used to, most of it live would be on the radio, not the TV. So I'd be listening in the middle of the night to the All Blacks playing in South Africa, or maybe the New Zealand cricket team somewhere, and it really drew me to it. That was part of my interest, developing in the sports was listening to it on the radio. But I don't know, it just seemed to happen. I don't know that I ever sort of intentionally set out to be a sports commentator. I was lucky enough to go into a job in radio straight after school. Went to work at 2ZE in Blenheim, Radio Marlborough. Jeff Bryan, who has been, guys had a big career in TV, he was working there at the same time. And then I got transferred away to Tokoroa, which I wasn't very happy about, because just like a week's notice, and you get to Tokoroa, I'm 18 years old, and it sort of felt like all the 18-year-old young women in town were all taken up. Long way from home, long way from the sea. But the upside of it was, I was doing all sorts of things on the radio station. I was, writing ads and doing air shifts. And then one day they said to me, the guy that normally covers the rugby, he's away. So we want you to go down, and there's a Peace Cup game on where South Waikato, and as you know, Tokoroa, they produce so many great players. Yeah. They had the Peace Cup and they were defending it against, I think it was Matamata sub-unions. And in that team, there was Bam Bam Korteka, Jeff Hines and Brian Morrissey all went on to become All Black forwards. Wow. And the first five from Patararu, this 19-year-old, skinny 19-year-old with a mop of curly hair and a great set of hands, Wayne Smith. So I always tell Smithy I discovered him. But I just did reports and that. I thought, wow, this is great. This is what I want to do. And it just so happened that about a month later, a job opened up for a trainee in Auckland. Yeah. And so, I was just lucky. And I think I've been lucky all my career. A lot of people say I'm very lucky to have my job. Extremely lucky. But no, what I mean is that doors a succession of opportunities arose over the years. And I've been fortunate enough to be in the right place in the right time to have a job that I still consider to be an absolute privilege to do. And I always said to myself, the day that I stop thinking that will be the day that I give it away and give it, someone else a chance.
Yeah, I can see in the way you talk about players and stuff that you can see that you take such pride in it, and it's such a privilege for you. With the radio, to be honest, I'm actually a fan of New Talk ZB, believe it or not. But there's nothing I like to hear better than Michael Laws or Marcus Lush having a chat with the old public. So radio for you, did you end up on the Talkback ZB?
At times, yeah. Like I started off, I worked in Auckland. I was sort of like a reporter. Then I started, I was in Wellington for a wee while. But I went to Dunedin, and that was the most important thing that happened. And I remember thinking, Dunedin seems like another place that's a long way away from where I come from. But it was interesting. I just happened to be, it was a bit of a name drop here, but I was with a group of guys at the Debrett's Hotel. Keith Quinn was one of them. And Keith Quinn said to me, you go down there, there's a guy down there, Bill Francis, will be your boss. You'll never regret it. And I didn't. And I went down there, and I guess that's where the commentating side of it really started for me. Great community down there. You're really close to it. And so I guess, that's kind of where I started doing the radio commentating, but I was also used to do the scoreboard program on the Saturday afternoon. Yeah. And, we had reporters around all over the place. And it's one thing that it really bugs me about radio now, that everything's networked. Back then you had a local radio station, and 4ZB was Dunedin, and Saturday afternoons was dedicated to covering sport around Otago. And we had one in Auckland, we had different ones, all the different stations had their own scoreboard program, and they don't have that anymore. And it really bugs me because people just used to listen, they'd be watching one game and they'd be listening to what was happening in another one. And it kept you really close to the heart of the game, which was club rugby. And we, in fact, the guys that I worked with, Steve Davey was one of them. He went on to be a very good commentator himself. The group of us, we used to go to a different club every Saturday night. We'd go to Kaikorai one Saturday, Pirates another Saturday. And so you had that involvement with club rugby. And it's the best training to do what I do now that you could imagine. Yeah.
I can imagine. It's sad that that's all kind of gone now. But it's funny because my old man, some of the old boys, they still actually enjoy listening to the games. I guess they're only professional games on radio now. Yeah. But he still quite enjoys it. He's got a TV. Well, I'm pretty sure he does. But I was like, "What do you watch the game?" He's like, "Oh no, I listen to it on the radio."
All the money you've earned over the years, surely you can buy Charlie a TV set.
Oh, you could. He still lives in an old shed though. He's one of those old purists, But so. Yeah,
I was to say, I think the difference was, or I always felt that, because I did it in radio for a long time. I did the commentaries, Auckland, Counties Manukau, North Harbour, some international stuff on radio. And I also felt like on radio, people were listening while they were doing something else.
Yeah.
So, it might be, I remember talking to, it was actually the wife of Sir Edmund Hillary. I actually had a chance to interview him once, and I was talking to her, and she said, she always used to enjoy listening to the radio commentaries while she was doing the gardening.
Yeah.
And I realised quite early when I went to TV that the difference was people listening on the radio, it's while they're driving somewhere or they're doing something else. People watching it on the TV, that is their focus.
Yeah, right.
And that's why you got to, really be on your game, because it's not like background noise or something you listen to for a while. That is their focus. And so if you get something wrong, they'll know about it. They'll pick it up.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a bit different. When you were just on radio, did you ever have like people, you'd meet someone and then they wouldn't know what you look like, but then they heard your voice and they're like, hang on, well, I've heard that voice somewhere before,
It's quite a nice sort of anonymity about it in a way. So you get known around the community and that. Of course, when I first went to TV, I went to TV3, and I was doing the sports news at 6 o'clock sports news, working with the great John Hawkesby, and that everything changed then, because it's a really high profile job that your face is on the TV, and TV3 news rating pretty well in those days, and so people did know who you were, and it did change. And
that would have changed today.
Wow, funny sort of ways too. Like I had a bunch of mates I used to go out with on like Friday nights, but you go to a bar and sometimes people be nice, but then sometimes people come up and get a bit niggly because just because you're some guy on the TV, and that took a bit of getting used to. I have to say, and I promise you this, I never got into it because I wanted to be famous or well known or any sort of celebrity or anything like that. I don't like that celebrity culture. It's just not for me. And I know Grant Nisbet's exactly the same thing about it. We're there because we love what we do, not because we want to be famous. And so in the end, when I got a chance to go to Sky, people, sure, they know who you are, they know your face and that, but I don't know. It's a little bit sort of lower key, so I can go down to the local pub down here, and people, you're just a guy from the neighbourhood,
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that because obviously Nisbo's one of the legends, over 300 Test caps to his name, and you both you started it because of the pure joy and love you get from sport, nothing to do with fame or any of that, and you can tell, you two have gone to the top. So,
well, he's been doing it for such a long time, and when I first started, he was one of the guys, in radio. He was also on radio at the time. In fact, I first met him when I was in Tokoroa. He was covering the 6-day cycle race. He used to go up the North Island, and I come into work and I just heard this voice booming out from the back room where he's on the phone doing a report on what's happened during the day, and that's when I first met him. And he's a legend. He's got a fantastic voice. It's just so much experience, and I've been lucky enough to have travelled, for quite a while, particularly when it was Nisbo, Murray Mexted and I.
Yeah, Murray Mexted.
And we travelled, all over, Europe or South Africa, Argentina, and had, some really great experiences. But, he's a guy who, I've always looked up to.
Yeah, it must be a buzz knowing, like, guys like yourself and Nisbo, your voice will be etched in history at certain moments, like, there's some famous moments. Is that weird to know that your voice forever, now will be a part of these moments?
Especially if you get it wrong. Yeah.
You don't get it wrong too often.
If you make a mistake, that's in history forever too. Yeah, because to me, that's what it's all about. It's about capturing the moment, telling the story, and sure, you have some significant moments, I suppose, that you get to. I mean, and with me, I've been lucky enough, like for example, to go to the Olympic Games and things like that. I don't think I think about it at the time. You're really just trying to do it right, nail the moment if you can, and then maybe sometimes you think, oh, it's occurred to me once or twice, but I try not to think about that too much.
Yeah.
Other than making sure you've got something to say.
Yeah.
When the moment arrives, but I don't sit there thinking, oh gosh, people are going to be hearing this in 20 years' time. I don't think about it like that.
You can't. No, you'd mind fuck yourself a bit.
Well, you're focusing probably on just a little bit the wrong thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like for you, speaking of stuff, like, do you think that commentary's got a big part in the player's career? Because personally, I think a commentator can really prop a player up, or like not many commentators talk bad about players, but like you can kind of do things like if the player makes a mistake, you can say something nice about them off topic, something like that. And because I feel like I've had a few games where I haven't played well, but then people, the uneducated rugby person will come up to me like, oh, you had a great game, the commentators were talking about you and stuff, and then you can have a good game and like the commentators might not have said too much about you know what I mean? Do you feel like that?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on what else is going on in the game. Sometimes you might get, a certain thing might overshadow, and I always try and recognise people who've made a solid contribution to the game as well as the ones who make a spectacular contribution to the game, and you can do that. You suddenly look up and you find that, say, Sam Whitelock's made 12 tackles or 15 tackles.
So you've got those stats.
We've got those stats in front of us, and they're there to be used, and they can help you just to recognise. Look, by and large, you always try and be really objective about it. Don't carry any grudge. There was one guy, I can tell you, there was one guy,
tell us.
He played for North Harbour, and he wasn't there for very long, and I first came across him at Irans, where, you were with Murray, and I thought then he was a bit of a wise guy, and I saw this comment, he used to wear this headgear, and bright coloured headgear, and he was asked in a questionnaire, why do you wear that bright coloured headgear? And he made the comment, because so the commentators don't get my name wrong, or to stop the commentators getting my name wrong. And I thought, well, I've done a lot of your games. I don't ever remember getting your name wrong. And then I sort of thought, okay. And I almost I got to the point where I thought, maybe I'll go through the whole game and I won't mention him at all. And I thought, no, that'd be silly. But then it just so turned out that every time the ball went near him, he either dropped it or he missed a tackle or something like that. And I just made sure I got his name right when that happened.
It's funny because Dan Pryor, who has been on this podcast last, we spoke about his hair and how it's kind of noticeable and helped him out. And it's funny because he did say that if you're going to do stuff like put the flash headgear on, if you're going well, you obviously get recognised, but if you're not, it's a double-edged sword, that they're going to have a crack, it's really noticeable.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, you have to, I guess, certain players do stand out. But look, part of the job is making sure you know who everyone is. And obviously some guys are easier to recognise, and Dan would very much be in that. But, it's something I try really hard to get right, is that identifying the players, because they're working really hard out there, and if they do something great and you say it's someone else, well then you're not doing them justice. So I go through.
Talk about the preparation on this, because I've seen you go through notes of like the Argentinians or the Island boys' names that are quite tough. I've seen you going through it, and you break it up. And what's that preparation side like?
Yeah, well, always try and have a look if I've got a game coming up. Say, for example, I'm doing a Northland Hawke's Bay game. Yeah. Then I'll record the games that they've played, and I'll have a look and just make sure that. I wouldn't say I'd look at the whole game. But just to make sure if there are new players there, you get to, obviously, players like yourself being around a while, you get to recognise them without having to worry about it too much. But you might sort of say, well, this guy wears orange boots, or that guy might have a bandage on his elbow or something like that. Anything to help you identify the players. And then, I usually, as soon as the teams come out, and at certain times of the year, they don't come out till pretty blimmin' late in the week, which, doesn't make it too easy. But I write all the teams out. I try and have a little bit of information, particularly if it's a new player. So a new guy coming into the game, that's a big deal. I remember when you played your first game at Eden Park, you came on for Tasman. That was your first game for Tasman. And, I mean, it was pretty easy. And I said, this is a great moment for the Waitohi Club in Picton. Well, it's my old club, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But to me, that's... And I know the other guys are like that as well. A new player making their debut for that player and for their whānau, for their club, for their community, particularly coming from a small one, that's a big deal. And so you've got to recognise that. So always try and have a little bit of info. Maybe a little story to drop in. You got to be careful. And this is going to be the biggest name drop of all, probably.
I want it.
But the first TV coverage, the first TV commentary job that I ever had was the Hong Kong Sevens in 1995. TV3 had the rights, and I went over there and find myself working alongside Bill McLaren, who is
It's funny because I was about to bring that up. We might as well get there right now, just real quickly. I just got a little sound grab here, TJ, the great man.
Well, he didn't get much distance with that.
This is another
superb take. That was marvellous timing. I wouldn't like to be at the bottom of that. Digs like a demented mole there.
That's Josh Cromfeld. That's Josh Cromfeld. He's talking about Josh. Yeah.
Because we talk about
the Crusher. Yeah.
We talk about goats of the commentary game, and there's yourself, there's Nisbo, there's Smitty, and then honourable mention to Scotty Sumo Stevens and the late Willie Lucy, all those guys. It's I know as a player, it's what you dreamed of, those guys, uttering your name through the mic. And and the guy, this is the one other guy that I think a lot of Kiwi young fellas will resonate with because of the game of Jonah Lomu Rugby on PlayStation.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know that.
Yeah. I do. Well, I know of it.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of PlayStation, Dan. But
Talk to me about him.
Okay, so Bill McLaren, when I started following the game, there was very little, virtually no rugby on TV from New Zealand.
Yeah.
And during the summer, you'd see the Six Nations, and it would be a week after the game was played. And so only the All Black games, you'd see them, but always the next day. You would never see them live. But the voice that you became most accustomed to, the one was Bill McLaren, because you used to get these Six Nations games, and J.P.R. Williams and Peter Brown, this great forward from the, and all this sort of thing.
Nuts and us on pom.
So that voice was one of the first recognisable things about the game, the international game, and it made it really tough. Keith Quinn became the first sort of regular full-time commentator that we had in New Zealand. Great commentator, Quinny, and a great man. But it was tough for him because, people compared him not to another New Zealand commentator, but to Bill McLaren.
Yeah.
Who's the
GOAT.
The GOAT, absolutely. And the loveliest man. He's a school teacher, Bill.
True.
And I worked with him in 1995, and I'm overawed. But I had met him a couple of times before. I'd interviewed him, like just with stars in my eyes at the World Cup in 1991, for example. And it was funny because you got 2 days of sevens coming up. And so on the Friday night, I'm with the TV3 crowd, and we're just going out to have something to eat and a couple of quiet beers.
Yeah.
And we're going out as Bill and his wife are coming in to the hotel.
Yeah.
And I won't try to do the accent too much, but he's going,
nailed it
"Oh,
before.
shilly-shallying about for you, lad. You've got a big job to do." And it's basically, I'm thinking, I really should turn around and go back to my hotel room now. And Bill had been out, like he was doing Portugal, and he was only doing them once in the whole tournament. I think it was Portugal, but he'd gone to their training. Yeah. So he knew every
He went to
single
Portugal's
player.
training.
He went to Portugal's training, and I'm going, God, what was I doing at that time? Probably in the restaurant having the curry buffet or something. And he showed me his notes, and he was famous for his notes. They used to auction them for charity, and they're like, almost a metre square. And he had all these notes on every single player, and he said, if I use more than half of them, I'm overdoing it.
Right.
So there's a lesson there. You've got this little story, but don't use it just for the sake of it. You've got to pick the right moment. And if that moment doesn't come, well, you might have to wait until next week or the next time you call those games to use it. So, as I say, it was just one of the great privileges that I've ever had to work with that guy. But, bumped into him over the years.
Yeah.
And you get to know a lot of the commentators from around the world, and some of them become really good friends. But obviously, Bill McLaren stands out.
Definitely
I don't say Nisbo. He's right up there, but Bill McLaren, absolutely the greatest we've ever had.
I agree. He's one. He's up in that top echelon with yourself and Nisbo, but he's definitely a very noticeable, legendary Scotsman. Would you say, did you learn a bit off him, like when you chatted to him?
Well, about the need for preparation.
Yeah.
And, there's something, I think a lot of people, particularly these days, when people are very watch with a critical eye, and with social media being what it is, people, everyone's got an opinion on something.
The cancel culture is pretty big now.
Well, but also people, it's sort of like if a team's not doing well, people want a bit of blood. They want you to criticise.
Especially our All Blacks.
Well, and if you're not criticising them, they say you're not doing your job properly. But I defy anyone to go through Bill McLaren, any game that he did, he never criticised the game. Mm-hmm. He never said this is a boring game.
Yeah.
He would find a way of saying, things have slowed down a little, or we're going through a tense period, or but he never criticised the game. He was always very careful. If someone did something stupid, he would never bag them.
Yeah.
He would say, "Oh, he'll regret that," or something like that. But I think the lesson there, and a guy who was a mentor of mine early on in my career, Alan Richards, who was a great cricket commentator, he commentated all over the world. He could sit next to the Aussies in Australia or at Lords with, the BBC hold his own. He was as good as any of them. And he said, you never denigrate the game when it gives you a living.
Very true.
And I've tried to live by
words.
that. And I know that people get frustrated because they want to hear you bagging players.
It's just how it's how New Zealand is kind of that tall poppy syndrome thing.
It is
they actually
bit,
enjoy a bit of blood, but
Yeah,
to be fair to you, TJ, I've never ever heard you slipping. You've always, I can tell the pride you take in representing that player's family and stuff. And I think everyone's mum loves you. All the players' mothers love you. I remember my mum on the blower to me. Oh, TJ was saying all these great things right here.
I might be a bit biased.
That's what I said to her too. He's probably a bit biased.
Well, you sometimes get, people say you've got favourites and things like that. Well, if a players are favourites because I think they're a good player. I like what they bring to the game. But as I say, you try and be fair. And the other thing too is the pronunciation of the names. I think that's, I know when I started out, and you go back to the sort of the late 80s, early 90s, and you're getting a lot of Pacifica players coming in, and at the time, I think a lot of the commentators, and I wasn't sort of really commentating much then, some of the names were a challenge, and there was this sort of tendency to say, whatever's easiest, don't, like James, one of our greatest league players, James Lulawai, as he was known, really should be pronounced Lulawai, but then the attitude was, look, whatever's easy. But that's changed now, and I think it's great. The players have a voice. If you don't get their names right, they'll come and say, could you please,
Have you had anyone do that to you?
Usually they'll go through someone in the media side of it, and they'll and it's always done very politely.
Yeah, of course.
I know early on we used to refer to Jerome Kaino. A lot of people did, but it was pointed out that it's really more Kaino.
Yeah.
Kaino, but for the most part, I think you avoid that by asking before the game, not finding out after the game. So if you've ever gotten any doubts, and they had that "say my name" thing, which was awesome.
Talk to me about that. Or
that was the players going, for example, James Lynchus.
Lynchus,
it's Lynchus, no cheese, because people were calling him Lynchies.
Right. Yeah, I didn't even know that. I know James.
Yeah, and just it was more done as a sort of a for the general public as well, and it's great. It just says to me that this is very much part of the everyday language of this country.
Yeah,
and it's a respect thing too. You got to get people's names
like
right.
that's all those players' ancestors were called by that name, and I think it's pretty important to get that name right. Yeah. Well, if we move on, TJ, we spoke off camera and stuff about your first All Blacks game that you commentated. Keep going on that. It was a good yarn.
Yeah. Okay. So for quite a few years, I'd been doing the sideline job. And so it was Nisbo calling, Murray Mixted, myself. And then we were in South Africa, and they had 2 tests that year. One at Loftus, and they won there. And then they played at Rustenburg, and we're like, where the hell's that?
I reckon.
And we stayed at Sun City, so you drive right up into the Highveld, and Sun City was this amazing sort of resort there. with a golf course designed by Gary Player and about 4 hotels there. And then about a 2-hour drive away, you come to this village, and it really is just a village. But the local tribe there are quite wealthy because they managed to get their land in a trust, which was a very rare thing in South Africa. And so when they discovered platinum, there was a bit of a windfall. So even though they still live quite modestly, the people there, they've got this amazing stadium. It's just in the middle of nowhere. And that was, and what happened was Nisbo had to come back to New Zealand for a family bereavement. And so I found myself calling the game. And it just so happened that the All Blacks lost it. There was I can't remember, there was a late penalty or something like that. And so they lost. And then so my first All Black full commentary, where I was the main commentator, they lost. And then the next one, I think it was the following year or a couple of years later, they played the Barbarians at Twickenham at the end of year tour, and Nisbo went home, and I called that game. And it was a sort of a second string All Black team, but they lost that.
Oh, God.
And then the next year was 2010, and I did the famous Beaver game at Hong Kong, when the game that sort of made Stephen Donald infamous, and luckily a story with a really, really happy ending for such a great
awesome
guy.
Ending.
But I called that game as well, and so Ken Laban started calling me Alpha because I was 0 for 3. My first 3 games, All Black Test matches, they lost. And then the guy who was the executive producer for rugby at Sky at the time was a real fanboy. And when he found out that I was down to do the All Blacks Australia semi-final at the 2011 World Cup, he goes, "That's it, we're going to lose." He says, "Robbie, you'll be happy." I'm going, "Why?" He said, "Because you're commentating. Every time the All Blacks play, you lose." So, yeah, I guess I was a little bit...
you managed to get that
quite
record on
pleased to
track.
get that monkey off my back.
Yeah, you managed to get it on track eventually, because I know you've commentated some of the great All Black victories and whatnot. If we keep moving on, talk to me about the TV show Reunion, because as I said, I was gutted when that was me and my old man's ritual watching that on whatever night it was, and to see it go off air was quite guttering. I was about to send a stern email to Sky Sports at one stage there, but tell me what happened there.
Well, that was the show that I really wanted to do when I first went to Sky in 1999. Stephen McIver had been doing it, and I just, thought that'd be a good one to do. And it just so happened that Stephen went off to do another show, and so I started doing that. And I can't, it escapes me when they finally pulled the pin on it, but it must have been, I must have done it for 10, 12 years.
Yeah, long time.
And it was a program that meant a lot to me. I was very actively involved in producing it. I had a couple of great producers, in particular a guy called Grant Harding, who did it for a long time, and then Charlie Stone, who's a great friend of mine, he produced it. And the whole idea was we wanted just a wrap-up of the week's action, so you could see the highlights of the games, but also talk about the flashpoints in the game, and maybe if there's a big issue. And we had some really big ones. What I was proud of was the fact that someone like Graham Henry or Steve Hansen or Steve Chu would come on willingly for an hour, and they would understand that there might be some fairly curly questions, but at least it gave them an opportunity to answer them in depth. Yeah. So we could actually do a 20-minute interview with someone like Ted or Steve Hansen, or, as I say, Steve Chu. We'd do that once a year, the sort of the State of the Nation type thing. And so that, I think, people seem to enjoy that. And I suppose our biggest scoop, or one of our biggest scoops, Marcus Kennedy, who's now one of the executive producers, or he is the executive producer at Live Sport. Back then he was sort of a young guy doing a lot of the replays. We found the eye gouging of Richie McCaw right at the end of the final in 2011.
I remember that.
There wasn't time during the game for them to focus on it because it came right at the end and there was too much going on.
Right.
And we dug that out, and that caused a bit of an international furore. That did. So I always sort of thought, the strength of that program was that we had people working behind the scenes who would go that extra mile to get, what we needed to do, whether it was a live hookup with someone. Somehow we came into possession of a bit of vision from when the Hurricanes were playing the Sharks. and one of the Hurricanes guys booted the ball into the grandstand, and I swear to God, from this was a taken from it wasn't part of the TV coverage. I suspect it was one of the Hurricanes cameras. You could see the ball sailing 20 rows into the stadium.
Yeah.
And then the ball boy hands a different ball to the guy on the sideline right in front of the referee, who I think was Marius Jonker.
Yeah.
And he threw the wrong ball and the Sharks scored the try and it won the game for them.
Oh, so they did a quick throw.
With the wrong ball.
Right. And you can't do that.
You couldn't find that vision off. Those are the sorts of things that used to happen because people would offer them up to you. But in the end, look, you know about television that nothing lasts forever, and someone's gonna come along and they'll have a different idea. And we got a new executive producer came in. A guy came in from overseas. He was a good guy, but he had different ideas about it. He thought, and he was one of those guys who really liked player-driven things. He liked the presenters to be ex-players, and so in the end, they made the change. I wasn't happy about it.
Yeah, that's bullshit in my opinion.
Yeah,
TJ.
well, but you have to take it. But I wasn't happy because it'd become a real. I used to refer to it as my baby.
Yeah.
But I also accept that things change. Different people have different ideas, and so I did Rugby Nation after that, and I was happy doing that. Again, I was working with my mate Charlie and a guy called Chris Bright, and it was just 3 or 4 of us, quick turnaround. But we got some great results out of that too. Until again they made the change to that as well, shortened it up a bit, and so I don't do quite so much front of camera stuff. I'm probably getting a bit old, a bit grey around the edges, but look, rather than I don't look back and say I'm bitter about what happened. It's no point, but I'm proud to have been able to do that for as long as I did.
So you should be, TJ. It was a legendary show. Going back to the show reunion, obviously, on a personal note, I ended up winning a scholarship, the reunion scholarship, to go to Ireland, and that come for me at a pretty crucial time because I was at a small school and I was kind of getting a few offers and questions whether to go to Marlborough boys or Nelson boys because I really wanted to go far in footy, and they were quite tempting offers, I suppose, but that option of selling out and not being with my good mates just was off the table for me. So I stayed at Queen Charlotte. I love my boys there. But I was kind of, I got to admit in the back of my head, I was wondering if I made the right decision. And then that kind of come along when I heard that you have offered me a scholarship to go to Ireland and stuff. And I think it just confirmed me I made the right decision because to have someone with a bit of skin in the game like you actually looking over me and just knowing that someone like you was watching, even a guy from a small school, was huge for me. And it was massive, TJ. I always thank you for that because that was cool, man.
Well, I remember coming down. We did a fundraiser because I think you guys were going off on a tour somewhere to Australia. Yeah, and I'd been actually I'll just branch out because I'd been in a first 15 from Queen Charlotte. We went to Fiji in mid-70s, and that's the first time our school had been anywhere. We'd get as far as Kaikoura or Otaki, that's about as far as we get. And we raised all our own money. No, not one single person in that team had the money given to them, to go. Yeah. And we went off to Fiji, and we played about 4 games, I think. But back in those days, the great thing about Fiji was duty-free shopping. So you couldn't buy ghetto blasters in New Zealand, watches. They're really expensive. Yeah. They're a lot cheaper over there. And so we spent all our, all the money we'd saved, our spending money, we spent it all when we were in a place called Korolevu and near Singatoka. We all went to Singatoka and we came out. And me and Colin Timms, my great mate from Timsy, and Alan DeJoux, who was the captain, we all bought these ghetto blasters. They were early version of a ghetto blaster, But the trouble is that gassed a lot of our spending money. And so what we started doing was the hotel we were in, it was too expensive to eat in the restaurant. So you'd eat everything. Breakfast was paid for. We'd eat everything on the breakfast menu. And then at lunchtime, you might buy a bit of fruit or something. And then in the evening, you'd just get together with your roomies and someone would buy a loaf of bread and someone would buy a tin of sardines or something.
Yeah.
And you'd share it all. And it was cool. But then one day, Jukebox, our captain, comes back from the local shop and he's got a chicken. And it's like, what's that? And he goes, well, it's a chicken. Yeah, but it's like it's dead and it's got no feathers, but that's it. It's not cooked. And I'll go, what's that for? Is this for dinner? Yeah, okay. Have you had a look around the room we're staying in? There's no stove. There's no, there's no pans, nothing like that. So we
didn't go raw on it, did you?
No, we stuffed it in the electric jug and boiled it.
I've heard this yarn, actually.
Yeah.
I have actually heard this yarn.
Yeah. So
Tell
we
us
boiled
about
it in the electric jug for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
And ate it. And
how did that go?
Well, if you ate it, if you tried to do it now, you'd probably die. But yeah, it worked
cook?
for us.
Yeah?
Yeah. We boiled chicken. Man, all the gunge was coming out the top of it. Our coach walked in at one stage and he just saw these two sort of the legs of the chicken sticking out the top of the jug and all this gunge flowing over it like some sort of volcano. And he just shook his head and walked out. But I thought it was pretty resourceful. But so getting back to, so I come back down to Picton to do this fundraiser. Barney Thomas, who was a great friend of mine at school, a guy who played rugby and cricket for New Zealand secondary schools. But unfortunately got a lot of injuries. But he's now really big in the whakatū, the iwi over in Nelson. And Barney and I did this fundraiser, and they said in the afternoon, come and watch the first 15 play. So that's when I saw you play. And Murray was always, we had this reunion scholarship, so we were always on the lookout for young players to give them the opportunity to go to IRANS, get some specialist coaching in their position, but also learn a little bit about just the wider picture about the potential to be a professional player, how to perhaps express yourself well, all that. This is where I came in. And so I said to Murray, I said, look, I think I might have a candidate for you. And we, with some help, and we had an endorsement not only from your coach, but I think Kieran Kane.
Kano.
Yeah. He definitely put in a word.
Yeah.
And because he was more associated with Marlborough College in those days.
Yeah.
And of course the Marlborough team, then Tasman. But so that's how that happened. So I was stoked that
so was I.
Not only because it was an opportunity for someone from my school, but it also from my town. But as I said before, mate, you took the opportunity and you ran with it, and that's the most important thing, because once you get that opportunity, it's all up to you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, TJ, and it's probably something I really needed at that time too, because I was pretty rough around the edges. I hadn't really had proper I've had good coaches, but not that next level kind of digging deep into the technicalities of the game and stuff.
Well, that was Murray's thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That Murray was very much into position-specific coaching.
Yeah.
And so that he'd have a coach there for pretty much each position.
Yeah.
I worked. I did some work down there for him for quite a few years. I found it very rewarding. And I think the first group that I was involved with, just giving them some skills about how to do an interview or how to do a speech or how to present themselves. A lot of kids are shy. They look down when they're talking, hold their head up so people can see them speak. But Jason Eaton was one of the in the first group, and I think Craig Clare, he went on and played a lot of rugby down south.
Yeah.
And look, mate, the biggest one of the lot probably was Francois Stein.
I was going to mention him because he's a bit legendary around IRANS, because apparently they've got that inside bit and it's got like a bit you can see through. Apparently he did a drop kick into it and smashed it. They couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Murray, I always used to say to Murray, I said, is there, stand out? Because one of the things when you're doing these presentation things, you're looking for leadership potential. And how players express themselves can be a factor in that. And I said, is there a standout? And he goes, oh, yeah, this boy from South Africa, mate, he's just going to go all the way. And I made a point of having a chat with him. And it turns out their family used to watch Reunion every week because it was really popular in South Africa.
Of course, TJ, it's a legendary show.
Well, yeah, but they liked it because I think there wasn't there's always a little bit of a political overtone in South Africa about how much you can say and that, whereas we tended to be able to speak our minds.
Yeah.
And he goes, Tony, would it be all right if I got a photo with you? And I'm going like, mate, the time's going to come, well, I'll consider it a favour if you even nod in my general direction. You know, you could just tell this guy's going to be one of the greats of the game. But, you know, that was pretty cool because I've seen him over the years and always says hello, always stops and talks. Great player, great. I know he's got his critics in South Africa, but I always thought, you know, great player and fortunate to have met him when he was such a young man.
Oh, you can't deny. Didn't he hit a drop kick from about 65 out or something?
Oh, he could kick a ball, all right. He could kick a ball. Big guy.
Yeah.
Sometimes you could tell when he'd found a good paddock in the off season. But those actually, most of the South African guys, in my experience, are really, really great guys.
Yeah.
A lot of humility about them. Really polite.
Yeah.
Respectful. Express themselves really well and always carry themselves really well. You know, they always dress smartly. And, you know, it's a place I've always loved going to.
Such a beautiful country, eh? We spoke about it earlier. It's just like, it just seems crazy what's going on there because it is such a beautiful country. And, it's when I played there, we were speaking about it too. And you said in commentary, just like the atmosphere is crazy and just the high veld, the oxygen, you know, that was actually a huge factor, something I never even thought about. Like, I consider myself reasonably fit, but man, I got into that thin air and I was like, holy, I'm in a bit of trouble here, you know.
Yeah. Well, even you know, first times going over there, even just sort of walking around a bit, you find it, you know, you get the dry throat and all that. But I had some great experiences there, and you know, to me, it all started with me listening to the All Blacks in South Africa. On the radio, or then in '76 it was on the TV. And so to actually go to those places like Kings Park and Ellis Park and Loftus, 2002 the All Blacks played at Kings Park and they had lost to Australia, and so they needed to win, probably with a bonus point, to win the when the rugby championship, or was the Tri-Nations in those days. That was the game where the guy came out on the field and jobbed the ref. You remember that? Peter from Potchefstroom, from Peter Sale, I think was his name.
And you mentioned it.
And he, the crowd was boiling, and I'm down on the sideline, and there's basically, I've got a low sort of fence just behind me. I'm sitting down at ground level. And the ref did make 2 or 3 really big calls that went against South Africa. I know they complain a lot, and it's like these days, it's like they never lose, you know, without the referee getting the blame. But back then, I think they had a Brayton Paulson scored a great try, and he ruled it out, and it was a tough call. And then Tana got awarded a penalty try for a high shot, and that was, and then the crowd, you could tell, you know, well, turns out they were boiling. I had headphones on, and then this guy runs out, he jumps the fence, and it was simply because the thing that broke the camel's back was that there was a scrum feed that everyone thought should have gone to South Africa, went to the All Blacks. And he goes over the fence and he charges out there and he knocks over the ref. And then Richie McCaw grabbed him and sort of wrestled him to the ground, but then AJ Fenter came in and snotted him. So this guy's coming off, he's got blood pouring out his nose, he's got his gut showing underneath. It's just a horrific sight. And, you know, that sort of that was the eruption. Yeah. And as soon as the game, what happened was that Aaron Major scored a try right in the last minute, and it was a bonus point try, broke the deadlock, All Blacks won the game, and I don't know, maybe involuntary, I just might have given it a little fist pump or something. I always tried not to do that, but I think under the circumstances, all it did was the people behind me just suddenly I became
they
the target.
reacted to you doing the fist pump.
But I didn't know. I just went like that or something, but I didn't know that they'd seen it. And next thing, Rick Solito was over there, and he comes up to me and he goes, "Come on, let's go at the end of the game." I said, yeah, mate, I'll just pack. He said, no, let's go now. Yeah. And I'm packing up my stuff. He grabbed me and he said, "We're going." And I look around and there's all these people shaking their fist at me and pointing. And one of these guys, this old man, yells at me. He goes, "You tell that Tana Umanga he is a puff." It took me quite a few years before I actually told Tana that, passed that message on. But
Yeah,
that was
fair
like a. But you know, the great thing about it was, afterwards we went into the car park, because that's the great thing about Kings Park, huge car park, and afterwards everyone's got the barbecue set up, and and there's this awesome. And within an hour of the game finished, everyone had forgotten about that, and we were just rugby fans enjoying each other's company. And it's one of the great experience. What had been a very controversial, almost sort of quite an ugly afternoon, turned into a great night.
Yeah. Did you have your own security team as?
Nah.
Nah, you didn't. 'Cause I know when you play over there.
No, I had Rick
you do.
Solito.
Oh, that's enough, eh? Big Rick in the front line.
Sometimes in Cape Town, people just get very exuberant.
Yeah.
It's not it's not threatening. It's never been threatening. But they get so wildly excited because, you know, a lot of them, they support the All Blacks. So it goes back to the days of back in 1970 when New Zealand Rugby Union finally sort of grew up here and told South Africa, we're not sending teams over unless our Māori players can come as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, of course.
And so a lot of the Cape coloured community
Yeah.
started supporting the All Blacks, and a lot of them still do. And
Oh,
so they
wow,
get
yeah.
these are the guys that when the bus arrives.
Yeah, I remember that. Far out.
yeah.
It's so hectic. Yeah, it's quite eye-opening, when you
Yeah.
first turn up in the bus and that. Because it's funny because I think pretty much every super team has the same security guard. He's a bit of a legend.
Oh yeah, I know the guy.
I
you're talking
forget
about.
his name now,
yeah.
but
Big guy. Yeah,
man, he's got some hectic stories. You know, he's lived a hard life.
yeah. I know
He's got a few
exactly who
bullet
you're
holes
talking
in
about.
him and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we move on, TJ, apart from being on the Couple Deep podcast with me, what's your highlight of your broadcasting career?
I couldn't
Couldn't put it on one.
could have put it on one.
Anything that comes
Well,
to
there's a
mind?
few. I mean, I've been lucky enough to go to the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
And I'd had a bit of bad luck, and it was almost like the start to my test calling. Barcelona in 1992, I was doing a commentary of the equestrian final when Andrew Nicholson and spinning rhombus went berserk and knocked over everything, and they went from sort of gold medal to bronze medal in the space of about 40 seconds.
Yeah. Tell me, how does a man end up commentating equestrian
Well,
as a rugby commentator?
I took off 1988 to 92. I worked in London for Radio New Zealand as a correspondent over there, and so I was covering a lot of sport. This was pre-internet days, and so, you know, people relied on reports being sent back to find out how Susan Devoy was going in the World Squash Champs, or how Paul McDonald and Ian Ferguson were doing in the canoeing champs and whatever. And so I covered a whole lot of sport over there, and just so happened that we had a great equestrian group over there at the time. And so I started going to the badminton horse trials and actually really loved it. I didn't know anything about it before I started going there. I had to learn all about it, but they're a really awesome bunch. Like big party goers.
Yeah.
Big parties. But
So I've
I
heard-
also love the work as well. You get to know them, and so I went to the World Equestrian Champs in Sweden. And they won 2 gold medals, and we thought, God, we're going to win the gold medal in Barcelona, but it didn't happen.
The TJ curse came back.
Oh,
did it?
maybe, yeah. Well, it wasn't until, and then I went to London, and I just only did equestrian there, and we were winning gold medals, including one to another good Picton boy, Joe Sullivan.
Oh, of
But
course, legendary rowing race, that one.
But I wasn't doing that. I was doing the equestrian, and we didn't get a gold medal. We got a medal, but not a gold medal. They had a good party after that too. So finally, when I went to Japan, I got to call New Zealand winning a gold medal at the Olympics.
Who was it?
That was the Sevens.
Ah, yeah, of course. Yeah,
That was the Wahine. That was amazing. Even though there were no people in the crowd, which was big shame. But that'd be right up there.
Yeah, wow.
And I loved the 2015 World Cup. I worked for ITV. Sky had, crew, Nisbo, Smithy, Marshy, Jeff, they went over there. But I'd got asked to go and work for ITV.
Yeah.
And so I was doing the international pool coverage, and so I was calling games with Joel Stransky.
Yeah.
And,
Legend.
well, yeah, apart from that drop goal that he kicked in 1995.
Yeah, bastard.
But great guy. And Chris Patterson, old Mossy, who's a Scotland winger. And I was doing all the different games, like rather than just doing the All Blacks, Samoa, South Africa, or I went down to Tonga against Namibia somewhere, and some big ones as well. And I really loved that because I was travelling all over Britain. World Cup in France was good too in 2007 until obviously we got to Cardiff. But I just think, any time you get to do something like that, it's great. I couldn't possibly pick out one moment. Yeah. The biggest fluke probably was at Barcelona. I did the track and field, but I was only reporting. They said, we don't need any commentary. We'll just do reports. And then they're lining up for the 100 metres final, and it was due to be like 10 to 6 in the morning New Zealand time, or 5 to 6. So I thought, by the time they cross to me, it'll be over and I'll be able to say who won.
Yeah.
And then there were 2 false starts. And I thought, God, they're going to cross to me just as, as it started.
Shit, yeah.
And so I quickly wrote down the names, and sure enough, I actually called the final of the 100 metres live. I don't know how I got away with that. I'd only had about 4 hours sleep.
Oh, well, I can imagine, TJ. Far out. Oh, bro, it's been a heck of a career you've had. It's funny because you say stuff like you're honoured to meet people, and you're quite buzzing out that they wanted a photo of you and stuff. But I don't think you realise how much of a legend you are and how iconic you are in New Zealand rugby. I've known a lot of players, and I haven't heard one say a bad word about you, because there has been in the past, there's been some commentator-player conflict, but with you've never caught slipping, and you've always represented the player and their family, as you say, so well. It's a real credit to you. It's the truth, TJ. And,
well, that's really nice of you to say, Dan. I mean, as I say, I just always thought it was just such a privileged job to have when you're in a position where you're able to do something that you love, and obviously love the game, but there's an excitement too about doing the live coverage, and again, if you ever turned up for a game and you don't feel that excitement, it's time to call it a day. But I've been really lucky. I've had good people that have had my back. I think that's really important all through. And I mentioned to Bill Francis, who was my boss in Dunedin, Kevin Cameron at Sky. These are guys who've had my back all the way through, and I'm just lucky that the old Steve Winwood thing, when you see a chance, take it, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's sort of. I also think the most important game is your next one.
Yeah.
So
well, I was going to come to that question. Like, you say it's a feeling when you're gonna finish up. So you're gonna keep going until that feeling of excitement goes?
Well, it'd be nice, to make the decision to sort of say, all right, time's up. I feel like I've still got a few years left in me.
Many
at the moment. Well, I'm in my 60s now, but as I say, as long as they keep having me. But again,
it's like me in rugby. As long as they keep having me.
Yeah. And look, it's who knows what the next few years are going to have in store for New Zealand rugby. The game's, I think, reaching a really important phase where I think they've got to make some decisions about the spectacle.
Yeah, agreed.
I think they've really got to take the bull by the horns there. They've got to do something about all these stoppages in the game and people trying to slow the game down and the game being over-refereed. And, other things as well. It's harder and harder to keep our good players in New Zealand. Hopefully to be able to do that. But you know what? No matter what happens in this game, you might go through a little period where there's a bit going wrong with it. It happened in the early 80s in New Zealand, the Springbok tour and the spinal injuries and all that. Yeah. But it always seems to find a way of coming back. Mm-hmm. And it'll always be, I love lots of sports, but it'll always be a game that I love. And as I say, it's just an absolute privilege to be able to be, part of it.
Well, TJ, it's a privilege. I'm speaking probably for all the players to have you out of their name over the mic, and I speak for the players and their families and their mums, as I said, that
mums are important, mate.
Yeah,
Keep the mums happy.
Yeah, we'd all just like to thank you, bro. You've always given everyone a fair shake and represented the person you're talking about really well, and you ought to be very proud of your career. And I know as a proud Picton man, it's crazy you've come from a small town to go onto these heights, and just even this is the second solid favour you've done for me, and to have me, around to your house for a podcast. It's truly humbling and something I'll never forget. So really appreciate it, TJ, and thank you for coming on, man.
Pleasure, brother.